In. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining me today is another author from the California Writers Group making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest is the youngest of three. She was born and raised in Texas and loved being from Texas, but growing up was not without its fair share of difficulties. Those difficulties, in her own words, may have been increased due to the time she grew up and the location. And children in the 1990s in Texas were not always kind to individuals with neurodivergency. As a child, she cannot communicate well with others due to Apraxia, and I probably butchered that. I apologize, viewers and listeners. A neurodivergence. And her speech development was an uphill battle with 2 tons tied to her waist, but after 2 years of work, she could no longer present as someone who had communication difficulties. And she will never be able to read or write phonetically, but she refused to let that stop her. Through sheer force of will, she powered through learning to read and write. And she also has attention deficit disorder that was not diagnosed until her late 20s. And through all of that, fantastical stories have captivated her so completely that she overcame the hurdles provided by those disorders. And her adoration for books skyrocketed once she could read them on her own, and it has yet to slow down her. An abundance of persistence helped her receive the Bachelor's of Fine Arts from California State Fullerton. And now she is able to communicate with the world. She loves building beautiful worlds filled with incredible characters. She knows that thrilling adventures that captivate the minds help one find their way out of the bleakest of situations. And in 2003, she was published in Celebrate Young Poets Speak Out. And more recently, she is in the process of getting her first full-length novel out. And to tell about that and more, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, poet and upcoming author, Megan Edwards. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you here on the show and to learn more about your story. So before we dive into your book that you are in the process of getting published, finding the right publishing house, is there anything you'd like to share with your viewers and listeners, possibly something that many people may not know?
Yeah, I just like to expand on the Apraxia a little bit because that really has defined a great deal of my abilities growing up. It's a neurological disorder. Basically, you're either born with it or you get it from a stroke. It's rare. A lot of times it can only be of the people that catch it, basically that diagnose it, end up being speech therapists, even though it's not just speech. The way it was in a nutshell, and probably those who are more well-versed in medical will be like, nah, that's kind of oversimplifying it. But the way I've always explained it is one side of my brain was more developed than the other. I am a whole word reader. Basically, I had to memorize the entire word, how it was spelled, in order to get the spelling correct and be able to read it. So a good example of that is that when I once saw the word Alexander spelled with 2 Z's, could not tell you what that word was. So that's definitely been I remember the first book I read was like in 2nd grade. That was not assisted with my mom helping me. And a big credit goes out to my mom for pushing me to learn how to read and write and everything. Again, it's never going to be phonetic for me. I'm not going to be able to see a word and sound it out very easily. I had to essentially rewire my brain. And that definitely did impact things growing up. And every now and then I'm sitting there like, oh, wonderful. I definitely know that was an issue with the Apraxia, is why I had that issue just now and then. It's something that sticks with me my entire life, and still affects me to this day. But for the most part, it's not obvious unless I get really, really tired, and then I start to slur a little bit. My muscles on one side of my body are like, there's a picture growing up of me just walking, and I had one foot tilted in because it was weaker side of my body. So that definitely impacted everything. And then the amazing thing is when you go undiagnosed with, pivoting a little, going undiagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and then you suddenly get medicated. If you're in the middle of writing a book, it makes a difference. I was like, oh my goodness gracious, I cannot write this without Adderall in my system. So,
Jeez. Oh my goodness gracious. But I am so glad. I mean, from your bio, you definitely pushed through and persevered and overcame those daunting obstacles and challenges. And again, so happy to have you here to talk about your journey as an author and the stories you have written. And speaking of stories, would you like to share with the viewers and listeners the story that we'll be talking about, which is the main one you are trying to get published via looking for the right publishing house?
yeah, of course. So the name of this book is called Witch of the Red Skies. A brief summary is what happens when a traumatized girl with a singular resolve for revenge gains the power to become mankind's deadliest witch.
Ooh.
That was the concept I had. And tragedy leaves a little girl with nothing but her own will to survive. She encounters an ancient dragon, Bahari, and her drive to live is enough to be reborn in as fire as Venra, one of the most powerful witches alive. She battles her lust for revenge for the tragedy of childhood and her desire to be a part of the human world. Empathy and selflessness earn her the love of dragons who raise her until an opportunity for revenge arrives. A group of mercenaries led by Ryan are charged to protect a prince from his usurper uncle. With them, Venra embarks on a journey to choose between revenge or saving a kingdom built upon the blood of her home.
Very nice. Absolutely very, very nice. And I love the story. Just from that synopsis, I already am intrigued by the story itself. So let's dive into some of the main questions. So, from your bio, reading has been a very integral part of your life. It was part of this push to break the barriers that initially people believe were against you, that saying that, you can't really do this, but you persevered. You pushed through the boundaries and really expanded your palette, so to speak. So, for you growing up and then finding your voice, would you say that once you were able to write poetry, short stories, and now working on your first novel, that sense of creativity has always been with you, but never had an outlet to really flourish?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always wrote once I learned how to write, and I was always writing little itty bitty stories. Nothing that I considered good enough to be published. So it's always been there, that creativity, because before I learned to write, I had to communicate in some way. Like there was in elementary school, the teacher had gave a questionnaire to the kids, and they said, "What did you do over the summer?" I drew 6 flags. So I had to find ways to communicate with people properly
Ah.
before I could do it in a way that most other people would typically communicate.
Okay, all right. And then also from your bio, you were also published in the Young Poets magazine back in 2003. And then from 2003 to now, what would you consider your aha moment that really pushed you to write your own novel?
Yeah, so shortly before I would say 2017,
Mm-hmm.
In 2017, just before Christmas, I had an idea and I was like, oh, that sounds like really cool. I started writing a little bit. I had like 18 pages written, nothing of significance that I was going to be like, oh, I need to finish this. But then my mom had a lot on her plate that year, and she always writes Christmas letters. And so I said, oh, Mom, leave that to me. I'll write the Christmas letter to the family this year. And then I hear back from my mom after the Christmas letters are sent out that my Aunt Sheila, my godmother, had responded. And she's like, oh my God, Megan's writing is really good. Like, that was funny. I liked it a lot. And so that was kind of the aha moment, because my mom's always been a great supporter of me, but she's my mom. So it's kind of one of those where it's like, I take it with a grain of salt because she's my supporter. She doesn't necessarily have to. But when she passed along that from my Aunt Sheila, who had not that my Aunt Sheila is like going to be brutally honest with me, but she had no reason to say, oh, Megan wrote that letter that Megan wrote was really good. She had there was no other than just, so it was a throwaway comment from my Aunt Sheila. And it just, from that moment, I was like, I told my mom, well, I have an idea and I wrote about 18 pages worth of it. Do you think you could read it? And she did. And she's like, I need more. And that's basically what triggered everything. It's just me writing a Christmas letter, my mom telling me that my aunt thought it was really good, and me going, Aunt Sheila has no reason to just give me, the false praise. And it's like I said, not that I don't trust my mom, but it's one of those things where it's like, my mom is my mom, and if you've got a good mom, she's going to be your biggest supporter. And even when it's been terrible, even when it was terrible, what you write is terrible, she'll still be like, oh my God, I like it so much. Aunt Sheila does not have to be that way. So that's what drove it all.
Nice. Well, that's amazing, Megan. That is absolutely incredible. So now let's dive into the construction of your upcoming novel. Now, there are going to be some fan questions sprinkled throughout, because I really love asking these fan questions and getting the really cool answers. So here's the first fan question, which is almost like an icebreaker. So once you got the idea for your story, did you have an outline already planned, or will you consider yourself an author who writes by the seam of their pants? And regardless of which direction you went, do you have a ritual or routine that keeps you grounded and centered when you're writing? In the sense of, if you want your book published by, as an example, January, you have like, okay, I'm going to write for this many hours, these many days a week, and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say as for my process, I'm a combination of both. I had written without an outline, just the idea, just to get it out of my head, 18 pages. And the second I realized that I was going to be serious about this, I said to myself, okay, let's give myself a little something of a roadmap. So I just wrote a bullet point outline of what's going to happen, the major events. And then I just sat down, typed it out. And then there were some things that changed throughout the story when I was building it. I was like, no, I don't like that. What that was happening in the outline. No, I'm going to do this. And one thing that really helped me was, and I think is a little maybe considered unconventional, because if maybe not for other authors, but just when you think about it, when you're first diving in, you'd be like, no, it's a story from A to B to C to D, all the way like straightforward. What I had to do to avoid rushing through the book, which I think I chalk up to the ADD, is when there were certain scenes in my head that I just had to get out, and I was just like, this is a really important scene. I'm really looking forward to writing it. I didn't wait. I just typed up the scene and then put it off in a file off to the side. And then when it came up to that scene, I just grabbed that scene, pasted it into the main document, and then proceeded forward. I may have tweaked it a little here and there to make it work for what I had, any changes I had written, but that was definitely the big part. of my process. Is just writing what I had to avoid rushing everything, but being very organic with my with the process. There were scenes in there that I'm like, I don't know where that came from. That definitely wasn't in the outline, but I like it. And then as for any making sure a ritual or anything like that, I didn't have a deadline when I was writing this. I was just writing it. I just didn't think about any deadlines or anything like that. I just sat down every single day. There were some days I had to take a break because when you write like 9 pages in a day, you're just like, smoke coming out of the brain.
Right.
So there were some things I learned about pacing myself, I think. That was a big thing when I was writing the book, especially in the revisions, learning about how to pace myself. So I would say more than anything, I didn't focus on a deadline. I would just focus on the book and pacing myself so I didn't burn myself out.
Yes, very true. Very, very true. And then from that point, as you began writing and refining over the series of edits for like chapters or sections of the book, what ultimately is your need or desire that you are satisfying as the author, as well as the promise you're making to your future readers?
So I noticed a lot of times in books that I had read, for women, young women, it was always, at least growing up, this is what I noticed. It was very much like, oh, don't be angry. Like, don't hold on to a grudge. Don't have these negative feelings. And so as a writer, I wanted to definitely document a healing process, maybe not a complete healing process, but the start of one. And I also wanted to let the readers know it's okay to be mad. Bad things happen sometimes, and it is okay to be upset. What you do with that anger and how you process it is the most important part. And that is something that my main character has to work through. She has to work through all this anger and rage and grudges that she's got. And it's not just like, okay, everything's like daisies and rainbows now that I've worked through it. She's still in pain. But that's okay because she's working on getting better, and that's the most important part. And that is the promise I think I wanted to my reader, to let my readers know. It is okay to have those painful emotions and have that anger. It's what you do with it and how you process it. That's the most important thing. And that is the promise I wanted to make to my readers, that they could feel safe just being angry about something that was an injustice that was done and has not been righted.
Absolutely true. Now, in terms of your characters in your books, from the main characters, the side characters, and of course the villains or villain, how did you make them feel authentic to your type of storytelling, but also complex? And as a bonus add-on to that, what has been your favorite moment writing, as well as the most challenging scene to write? You don't have to be too specific to avoid any
don't want to
spoilers.
give any spoilers. I would say I had some characters based off of, and again, it goes back into that organic process where I knew the core concepts of my characters. I knew this character has to work on keeping character B from going off the rails and destroying everything. So, and this character A, needs to work on making sure protagonist, or like whichever character I'm working with, doesn't do this. So I knew that their core responsibilities would be important. And for it to be natural, I had to somehow naturally make that a part of their characteristic. Like, for example, Ryan in the book, I mentioned him in the synopsis, or the summary. He is very much he had to show a love for the world And I did that, no spoilers on this, but I did that by showing how much he loved his little sister, who he hasn't seen in years, and just his desire to be a protector. And that, in turn, worked for the role he was given in the book. And then the most difficult scene actually there was a moment where I had trouble with dialogue in this scene. And it was so funny because there's this one character, I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say her name is Tundra.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the scene. I just couldn't figure out this one scene, like how she would say something. And I was just like, I need to get the scene over with. I'm just going to give her a throwaway dialogue. I'll figure out something later. I sent it to my mom, and my mom immediately picked up on that dialogue. And she was like, that's not how Tundra would talk. And I was like, what? And she was like, no, that's not Tundra at all, Megan. Why would Tundra say something like that? That's not how she talks at all. And I'm just like, I made Tundra. I decide how she talks. And my mom's like, well, you decided wrong. And I was just like, yes, okay, it is a throwaway dialogue. And she's like, it was very apparent because that's not at all what your character would say. And that was one of the most complex, but it was also one of the most rewarding moments where like this made up character was so was so unique in a way that even a throwaway that didn't fit her character, that a reader can go, oh no, that is not that character. And it wasn't like a bad, it was just like, it was just like, oh, I'll do this. And my mom's like, no, she wouldn't talk like that. She would say it differently. You need to go back and fix that. And that has always been one of my most rewarding moments as a writer, is to have my character so set and so unique that she couldn't just have a dialogue throwaway. I had to go back in, make it Tundra's conversational style, or make it like Tundra, how she would say it, and figure that out. So it was complex, and having to figure out how I was going to make that scene work and make sure Tundra didn't say something wrong, because my mom would get on me about that.
That's amazing. That's absolutely hysterical. And that, funnily enough, goes into the next set of questions, which has been, feedback and reviews. Now, as mentioned earlier off camera, your book is still in the process of, finding that publisher and really being published. So you probably have not shared this work with a lot of people outside of your inner circle, I imagine. But from the people you have shared it with, what has the general feedback been like for the story as well as the characters? Because as you already said, your mother is very, very particular of how Tundra is supposed to speak.
Yeah. So for the most part, it's been positive. I did get some critiques about like, hey, there's something I'd like to see some more of. And when I thought it over, I was like, oh, you're right. It's just one of those. So I did definitely take back. But as I was saying, the most part it's been positive reviews from my from the alpha, beta readers that I have. And I would say that overall, it's just been surprising to me that something that I just had it. So when it is hard for me to believe it, sometimes that people are like, oh yeah, this is good. And I think one part, I had one of my friends look at it and he said, Megan, this is really good. I hope it's a series because some of your concerns would be alleviated so long as this is a series. By itself, I would definitely change a couple things, but if it's going to become a series, and I was like, well, it is going to become a series. Things like, then it's great for first building your world, and it's great for giving me these playing blocks for your world that I'm seeing being, and it's like, you did a very good job on world building, and like you said, so long as it's not a standalone, it's not an issue, some of the twists I give.
Very true. Very, very true. And kind of, well, before you get into this, there's some lead-up questions to this. And these are some very old questions that I used to ask that I have not asked in a very, very long time, but I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on, Megan, is for you as a writer and as an author, why do you write and who do you write for? And I know as authors, it's a very lonely journey because sometimes we spend years and years and if not decades writing a story and we only write for us. We don't write for anyone else in mind. I've had a lot of authors that have had differing answers to this, to these old questions. So I'd like to hear from you, Megan. Why do you write and who do you write for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like you said, you write for yourself a little bit, but I can't help but be drawn back to the promise that I made my reader, the promise that I made my readers that it's okay to want to hide away from the world and be angry and everything, but that's not necessarily the way you should handle your problems.
Mm,
It's how you handle your problems is the most important part. So I think, again, going back to when I said growing up, I didn't see a lot of, oh, this is my main character. They're angry, but it's okay for them to be angry. They're right to be angry about what happened. It's what they
mm,
do with their rage. So I think I definitely wanted to expand that in growing up, for when growing up. And so I would say those who are in the process of growing as children from to adulthood, I would say young adults specifically would be, and adults. I mean, I feel like my writing hits both young adults and adults, but just
mm,
the individuals that feel like they're having to suppress part of themselves in order to fit in. I feel like that is a big audience that I wanted to hit
mm,
because, like I said in my bio, it's growing up, children in 1999 to 2000 weren't exactly kind to anyone who's different, at least where I was growing up. It
right.
was an interesting situation. I definitely did get bullied as a kid, but funny enough, I didn't realize that I was actually being bullied because I won those fights. So I was like, but again, that's is it's just I wanted to reach out and let those kids know it's okay to be angry. So I would say those are my audience, that those that have had to suppress part of themselves in order to fit in would definitely be who I write for and my audience. So that I feel like
Mm.
is the biggest answer. It's for myself, but it's also to show people who have had to like suppress part of themselves to fit in. It's definitely for them as well.
Very true. Very, very true, Megan. And that kind of leads into the next question or questions, before we get to the business talk of being an author. And that is, what does it mean to be an author and a creative in the digital age? Because the industry has changed in the last 20 years. Social media was not as prevalent as it was 20 years ago. And now it seems unthinkable to be an author and not have some form of online presence. So people can check out your work, so people can learn a little bit more about you or what we allow people to learn about us. And social media, while it is a beneficial tool, it can be socially draining. I've had a lot of people, a lot of good friends of mine who are authors who have had to take 6 months away from social media, and I couldn't talk with them. I could chat with them through email, but that pretty much was about it. There was no updates on their social media. And that goes into the topic of what it means to be an author in today's digital age, because again, while it is a good thing, it's also a bad thing because we leave ourselves exposed to the negativity. Not to mention, social media heightens imposter syndrome as well as writer's block in terms of, oh my gosh, all these books are coming out. Wait, is that author writing the same thing as I am? Am I a fraud? All these questions and more can pretty much stun us, paralyze us into not finishing our work. So for you, Megan, number one, with all that said, what has disciplined you to be the best author you can be? And secondly, when you may have those moments of imposter syndrome or writer's block, how do you overcome it?
Yeah, so I would say what's disciplined me to be the best is, surprisingly enough, my childhood. Like I said before, I was bullied. I learned not to give a crap about it. I was very much like, I don't care. It's like I learned very on, yeah, sticks and stones may break my bones, words would never hurt me. I'm like, well, words do hurt, but I'm still gonna just ignore that person. I think what disciplined me the most is something my mom had said. Again, she is a big inspiration. She told me, she's like, grow, like you should have circles of people, basically. Your inner circle, it may be just 2-3 people, but these are the people that what they say matters the most to you. Their opinion is going to hold most weight. You're going to tell them just about everything. Going out, there's about 5 or 6 people in this circle, in the next circle, and they do hear about things eventually, but they're not the first person you call. And going out, it goes out even further and further and further. And I learned very early on that the people that if they called me up and said, Megan, I'm angry at you. And these are my 2 best friends. If they called me up and said, oh my God, what did I do? I must fix this right now. And that mindset of just like knowing whose voice is most important, I think is a big part of discipline. Because there's people in my life where it's like, yeah, we're close, but if they called me up and said, I'm mad at you, I'd be like, why? So that would be my response. It sounds very callous, where I'm just like, why are you mad at me? And then depending on what they tell me, I would be like, oh, okay. But my 2 best friends, if they called me up and said, oh my God, Megan, you did this, I'd be like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what we're talking about, but your words hold the most weight. So I think it's important as an author and in social media to know whose voice should hold the most weight. And those are people that you're close to, not just words on a screen.
Yes.
I fully admit I'm not the best at social media. So that is because I'm a private person by nature. I'm trying to be more outgoing with my information. That's why I was willing to share, especially considering how big it influenced on the book, the trouble growing up with the neurodivergencies. I don't talk about that kind of stuff on social media just because I learned early on it's either going to get, the people that matter to me, whose opinion, not that I don't care about what my audience thinks, it's more of the people whose words are going to have the greatest weight on me, I'm going to have a face-to-face conversation with. They're not going to just be some random person on the. So that is something growing up that definitely affected my discipline in learning who to trust on what decisions I make. And then, so I would say that more than anything else is that circle mentality. Yes, there are people who I'm going to take what they said, I'm going to consider it, I'm going to weigh it in my head, and if it's valid, then I will apply it. But there's very few people in my life that, like I said, they call up and they say, I am so mad at you for XYZ, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what's going on, but I'm so sorry.
I understand completely. And those are very, very great answers. And this kind of leads into the next question, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on. And it is this. So for context for this question, I've been doing the show now for about 6-7 years, and I've had a chance to meet almost 190 authors. I had a chance to look back at it, 190 authors in a span of 6-7 years on Spotify and YouTube, respectfully. And looking back on that, from the people that I've interviewed, a lot of us began our careers professionally around the time of COVID. That became what I like to call the lockdown era of authors, and just for anyone in general who was in the creative mindset. And once the floodgates open, a flood of new talent entered the industry from authors, editors, narrators, artists, and more. And this has sparked a debate of whether or not, because of that flood, we're in a golden age or an iron age. Some people say a golden age because of the amount of voices that are in the industry. Others have argued an iron age in regards to weeding out those who are passionate about the industry as opposed to those who only just wrote something or created something just to get a quick buck. Hence, not as shiny as gold, but a little bit stronger and has a better foundation. So for you, Megan, in your opinion, do you think we are in a golden age or rather an iron age?
That's a good question. I read a lot, and I would say I think it was initially it was iron, where it was more for a quick buck, find some way to sustain themselves during COVID. And I do feel like that is a valid argument. And but there were some books, I'm not going to name names, those of us who know, but there were some books that came out and long before COVID, and I'm just sitting there like, did you not use a dictionary? But
why do I automatically know the book you're talking about?
I'm not going to say it, but I was just like, that's not a word. And even if it was a word, the place you put it makes it the exact opposite of what you were talking about. What is going on here? But I'm not going to name any names because there are cult followings for this book, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to bring that down on my head. And plus, everyone has different preferences, and there's plenty of things I read as a guilty pleasure, where it's just like, it's not that good, but it's just for fun. But I would say it started that way after COVID, definitely turned a little bit iron. But I feel like the more we get away from COVID and the more golden it becomes, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because the people that really are invested in this and want to do this are going to stay in it. And so they're the ones that are going to, they're going to definitely be in the beginning, quick buck to supplement the income that they may have lost, found ways to do that. But I think so it's kind of a mixture of the two. If iron and gold could possibly mix, then I would say whatever element that would be.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very true. And now, of course, I would love now to hear your thoughts on probably the biggest one that's developing in the writing industry. And that is, of course, the role of AI in the publishing industry. Now, I've talked to a lot of authors from differing opinions on this side. A lot of us are in agreement that when it comes to writing books, we should not use AI in that regard. Now, could we use AI to help with refining our outlines? Absolutely. Could we use it to help plan out a timeline? Sure. Why not? Redefine character bios, character descriptions, or stuff like that, or even refining the synopsis of the book so that way it flows and makes sense. Why not? I've absolutely used that for my stories. I've written them out first, had them run through Grammarly to make them sound more engaging. It is a little bit different, but it's still my voice. It's still my words that I wrote. Did not tell Grammarly to do that. But I digress. This is an issue or a topic that is very sensitive, and there are very polarizing thoughts on it. So, Megan, I would like to hear your thoughts on the role of AI in terms of writing stories and the publication industry in general.
So I have no problem when it comes to certain applications of AI. I have a problem when it's the story itself. When the soul is made with AI, then I'm like, no, that was a computer generated story. I don't like it. I'm out on this story. Whoever's saying this is their work, I'm going to call them on it. I'm just going to be like, no, you're not an author. You're just, I don't even know what to call you, but other than fraud at the moment, if you're using AI to supplement like 90% of your work, or even just 50%, or even 10% if you're using it to write it. I don't believe in putting AI when you're writing it. I'm fine when it comes to using AI to polish certain things. Like, obviously, Grammarly, putting it through just to make sure, because grammar I'm terrible on. Definitely has to do with the Apraxia on that, where I'm just like, okay, I need assistance of some kind, and I cannot afford to drop a couple thousand on an editor just to go through and right now. So I would say if you're needing assistance with your grammar, that's fine. I don't have an issue with it. But when it's affecting and determining what happens in the story, when it has an impact on the story itself, that's when I draw the line.
Yes. Very
And
true.
definitely don't mind its assistance in, like, okay, so if, for example, you were using AI to remember what the timeline is of a already written stuff, if you just put it in the in your AI and it's just like, hey, what's the timeline in the book, just so that you can use it for referencing, because I don't have an issue with that, because you're using your work and you're just basically saying, hey, give me what year this happened in my book. And because you don't want to have to go back and you've forgotten that it happened 1,000 years ago in whatever age. I'm like, that's fine. So long as, again, it's not impacting any decisions of the book or making any changes like that, significant changes, I'm okay with it. But is when you start using it to supplement your own work instead of doing the work, that's when, and just saying, putting your name on it, that's when I have an issue.
Yes. 100% could not agree more. Megan, could not agree more. And so sorry, you can't hear, but so sorry about that. Let me
It's
just
okay.
get my hat back on. So now we're going into the business side of being an author. And for these questions, I'm actually going to kind of make a little bit more of rapid fire, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So for the first rapid fire question, when it comes to the business side, what is more important to you? The readership or the audience in the genre?
What do you mean by readership? Because
Like
they can
YA,
be
NA, AF, that kind of readership.
Oh, okay. I would say the audience.
All right. All right. Next one. What do you find to be more difficult in terms of writing? Writing an emotional scene or writing the climax or the resolution?
I think resolution, because it's there's a moment where you're like, oh, I put so much work into it and now it's done. So it's hard to let go.
Awesome. Next one. How do you balance your voice as an author in terms of knowing the genre that you're writing in, but also highlighting you in terms of your writing?
I would say that I focus more on highlighting myself as my writing, because originally I didn't even know what genre the story was going to land in. I thought it was just gonna be a fantasy, like a young adult fantasy, and it turned out to be an epic fantasy. So I was just like, when I was told, hey, this is actually an epic fantasy. So that's a weird question for me, because of how I didn't know that my book was technically epic fantasy until my developmental editor told me, this is actually an epic fantasy. You got to add more words.
Nice. Very, very nice. This was a two-parter. How do you know when to stop writing, and how did you make the ending satisfying? Again, you don't have to go into spoiler heavy, but how did you know when to stop and make it satisfying?
So I always knew the ending of the book, of the first book, and going into this, I know the ending of the series. It definitely was. So it was just one of those things where reaching that end point, I knew what the epilogue, as it were, was going to be. It originally did not be an epilogue, that I incorporated it into the last chapter entirely instead of just doing a little epilogue. But so it's one of those where I had to know in the beginning what the ending was going to be, or else it would still be going. And I'm
Very
sorry,
true.
what was the second part of the question?
I think it was, how did you make your ending satisfying?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So after the climax and I came to the ending, it definitely needed to go into the next book a little bit. So I think that's how I made it satisfying to me, is because their conversation is making it apparent that this is not the end of the journey for my main character.
Nice. And finally, the last two important questions. What do you want readers to take away from your book? And what is your advice to fellow authors who are in the process of writing their own stories?
Yeah, so what I want, again, is that promise that to those that have to hide away part of themselves, that it's okay to, those negative and or whatever it is you're trying to hide is okay not to hide it, that part of yourself. I mean, if you're a criminal of some sort, turn yourself in, definitely, and do your penance. But the darker parts of the selves that we hide, for most people, I'm saying, doesn't need to be hidden away. We don't have to treat ourselves like some sort of dirty little secret just because we like to spin around like a top on the middle of the day just because for fun, or whatever little odd quirk you have. That's what I would say I want readers to take away, that you can have these dark emotions, you can have these dark part of yourselves, but that doesn't make you evil. It doesn't make you a bad person. Again, if you've done something breaking the law, that's a different story entirely. But for the average person, just because you have these darker parts of yourself doesn't mean you are a bad person. That's just one part of the whole. There's more to the story than other people might be going on. And my advice to other authors, especially new authors when they're first starting out, I would say write the story that appeals to you, that you wish you had when you were growing up. Because I think that makes more of an impact. You put more of yourself into it, and it matters more to you when you're writing that story. That, for me, again, growing up, it was always like, no, we must be kind and sweet and nice because we're ladies. It wasn't a story where it was dark and gritty and the main protagonist was female and she was going through all these horrible things and she just hanging on by a thread.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay because she made it to the other side. That was a story that I felt was missing when I was growing up, and that's why it was so important for my story to have these PTSD inducing moments for my main character. So I feel bad for her afterwards. I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad she's fictional, because otherwise I would be a terrible person. So.
Oh, man. Beautiful, Megan. Beautiful. And with that, we conclude this amazing, incredible author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. A huge thank you to my friend, Megan Edwards, for coming on the show. We wish her the very best on her journey. And Megan, where can people follow you on social media to stay up to date with writing stuff? And if they wanted to meet you and learn more, where could they meet you?
Yeah, of course. So I would say reach out to me on social media. Instagram would be the best option. I don't have the strongest presence because I'm a very private person in general, but if you're wanting to set up a meet and greet or anything like that, or if you just want to hear more about how it's okay to go through all this stuff and make it to the other side, and you just want to, or just have that encouragement to make it to the other side, especially if you're like me and grew up in a situation that was not ideal for what you had. Reach out to me on Instagram. It's M Edwards 175. So Megan, not Meg. So M as in Megan, Edwards, my last name, EDWARDS 175.
Awesome. I will link that down below in the description of this video. And to add on to that, if you'd like to see Megan or myself in person, you can always find us at the Packing House in Anaheim, the first Saturday of every month at the California Writers Club annual monthly meetup, which you can find them on social media as well. And again, viewers and listeners, thank you again for joining us for another amazing author interview. A huge thank you to my friend Megan for coming on the show, making this her official debut on the show. And again, wishing her the very best in her journey of finding a publisher and distributing her book. I cannot wait to read it. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all new episodes coming out for the last 2 weeks of September. And until next time, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in the next episode.